Why, hello.
Why, hello, Dr. Brad. Good Sunday morning to you. It's a
Happy
pleasure.
Sunday to you, Curt. We're doing all right. Back in the saddle again.
Ready to deliver some more sermons on the fate of humanity?
Yeah, I just finished my book on the One Nation Under Blackmail. That was disturbing a little bit because it's the conclusion of the book is the amalgamation of organized crime and blackmail, sexual blackmail, via the likes of Mr. Epstein has gone the wayside as digital surveillance of everybody. There's specific notation of the vilification of Elon Musk, of all people, having purchased Twitter and acting as a limited hangout for intelligence gathering to cause the people on the right to have complacency.
I actually had no idea that it was that deep or that it was in Facebook. I mean, the number of Intel people,
I think they own all of it.
it's really disturbing. Now, but you subtly, not so subtly, stated something very important because I grew up in the age, and when I worked with Intel, we were still trying to create bumps. And hold on. And my most of my job was spreading software. Right.
What's a bump?
A bump is when I act like I'm running into you by accident,
Oh,
right? But I'm trying to create a relationship with you because you have a relationship with somebody who's now who I would provide desire insight into. And so am I telling to? I always have to. What can I? I can only say things that are public knowledge.
right.
Right. So so in any event, that happened. But I was I remember at the end of the Vietnam War, we sort of gutted the CIA. Right. And this caused a really real problem. It's why we had a problem in the Middle East, is because we had shut down the human intelligence side of the CIA post war quite a bit. And so and what had happened is, of course, we needed to shift human intelligence from the Russian sphere to the Middle Eastern sphere, and it got ahead. So there's this huge recruiting effort, which, as a person of extraordinarily white features, I value in. But there's a huge recruiting effort to restore people who could speak, Farsi or Arabic.
Right.
Um, and so the shift happened in trying to build people up, and it's one of the reasons we had such a problem in Iraq, is because we didn't have anybody. We were counting on basically one person, right? And that person was ended up being either wrong or full of shit. My belief is he was wrong, because the just like Russia creates propaganda today, right, for their domestic audience, the Iraq had been trying to create propaganda to about their strengths in order to prevent Iran from restoring the Iran-Iraq war, right? And so the problem is this propaganda was so successful that people who with close proximity to elites in Iraq were telling us that this stuff was real. Right. And so, of course, that benefit from the fact that we wanted to believe it was real. Right. So if your information is confirming your belief, it's
That's not
problematic.
good.
That's not good. So what happened during my sort of generation was that there was this rapid scale up, a restoration of human intelligence, and then the technology became available to skip the difficulty and unreliability of human intelligence with technology. So instead of me having to bump you, right, and develop a relationship with you, which honestly I really enjoy, because I'm a
Thank you.
gregarious fucking psycho, right? I mean, it's one that I really enjoy. No, I meant you in particular, but in general, people will talk to me for God knows whatever reason. So I mean, it's because I'm so open. So you go out and you bump people, and that's actually fine. But the thing is, now you're not really interested in bumping people to get their knowledge. You're interested in bumping people so you can get access to a telco or a computer or a laptop, so you can take one of the little fucking drives that big and put it on there like that, and then like
back door
8 seconds, you're tracking every fucking keyboard key press they have, right? I mean, and that shit's fucking everywhere. Right. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, the thing that we were trying to get around was the Stuxnet virus back in the day, right? Yeah. This is all common knowledge now, so I don't have to say it. So the funny thing to me was where we were trying to get that virus into and that information out of was always so many degrees of indirection. In other words, it wasn't like you needed to be right in a place where the computer you wanted was. It was anywhere in the chain that could
proximity
come close to it, which could be on the other side of the planet.
Very strange, huh?
And so what's happened is, as you mentioned, there's been this decline. There's never going to be, I don't think, again. In other words, we seem to have learned that human is incredibly important, and we have to, because we were down to like 700 agents, field people. Agents is the wrong word. That's not. They call it officers, right? But the public uses the word agent, which is kind of funny. It's one of those things that makes the internal people know you don't know what you're talking about, right? So, because it's operatives and agents versus operatives and officers, right?
Yes.
And so, any event, so this shift has occurred now to where we have fucking surveillance on everything, so much so that they can go tell Putin, just to let you know, we know where you are at every fucking moment of the day, which is why he has no cell phone. He doesn't have a smartphone, right? He doesn't use an iPad or a laptop. He's completely paper and voice driven. Because he wants to minimize, but it doesn't matter because we know where he is all the time, and let's just drop a bumper buster from bunker buster from highway, and he'll be gone. So we have this wonderful thing. The problem, as you just mentioned, I'm taking a long circuitous route to get here because I'm trying to explain to the audience how we did get here, which is that now that social media is better than any bug, because you know why? It's demonstrated behavior. You know what I mean? It's not you when you're interviewed, you're reporting, right? But you're not demonstrating, right? We all basically lie constantly, right? We tailor what we're saying to other people, but demonstrated behavior on social media is demonstrated behavior, and moreover, it's cross-referenced as demonstrated behavior. So whereas I might hear some gossip that you said, right, and I might extrapolate from that,
right,
that might have just been some stupid thing you were saying, some joke or some misinterpretation, right? But when you've got this constellation of cross-referencing conversations, all of a sudden, now you've got
it looks like that coffee cup image you showed me.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, so in the surveillance state, and we have to stop this before it gets much farther. The problem, of course, is that do you need a surveillance state in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark? Of course not, because they're small, ethnically homogeneous societies with little interest in defect. But we're a large heterogeneous society now, intentionally undermined to create diversity, which means there's many incentives to defect, which is the whole point, right? It's to undermine the stability of the polity. And so now you have many incentives to defect, and you have this need for surveillance state, right, which makes it much cheaper and easier for people to sort of get on you. The problem is it's the mom and the minivan ticket problem. In other words,
Okay.
really cheap to generate prosecutions and tickets and revenue from policing a mom in a minivan going 2 miles over the speed limit in a zone, right?
Because she'll pay and she has money.
Because she'll pay and she has money. Whereas you can selectively prosecute anybody you want, which is what they do, right? It's selectively prosecute anybody they want by chasing down people they have an interest in chasing down, right? And so that's what's happening. And so we're developing a totalitarian state, not even because people need to have some evil ambition. It's because the hold on, I just want to say they don't have to have it, right? Incentives exist. Those incentives were created. That's important. The incentives were created by the creation of this lie that diversity is a good. All right, all these lies they've built up, the anti-white, the white hate, the white racism, the anti-Westernism, the anti-Americanism, the refusal to take the Jews' attack on Christian display in the public, the Jewish attack on oaths, right? All these attacks were meant to undermine, right? Because they wouldn't demonstrate their loyalty, because that's what Jews do. That's why they rebelled against the empire, was that the empire wanted minimum demonstration of loyalty, but the Jews wouldn't demonstrate loyalty. Well, women don't demonstrate loyalty. So and so we saw this undermining take place, and the undermining is going to deterministically result in a surveillance state out of the mixture of cheap costs of policing large people with more diverse interests, and therefore more incentive to defect. In other words, so you get what you get. It's like you get what you get. Anyway, did I go off on enough of a rant there?
There you did. So deterministic outcome. I don't think it's a deterministic outcome.
No, I mean, it's a deterministic outcome if we don't do anything.
There you have it. It is the outcome that will inevitably cause the response.
Correct.
That's how I regard it. I want to introduce this episode, sir. This is episode 2301, number 12. Please hit like and subscribe, notifications, leave some messages, check the website at the Institute, so you might leave a generous donation. Curt, we did good job yesterday.
I was just going to bring that up.
Oh, yeah?
If y'all haven't seen the A video from yesterday, right? Y'all should watch that video, because the arcs we just covered the spy arc, right? The intelligence arc, which is
That's right.
It's kind of interesting, right? But yesterday we covered a whole bunch of arcs that are really quite fascinating. I know, because I just listened to it prior to coming on here, and I'm like, damn, we did a really good job. Now, I listen to everything at 1.5 times or more, but I mean, you listen to whatever speed you want. I seem to measure unless I'm on a particular rant like I am at the moment, I tend to try to measure my words, because I'm likely to curse or use inappropriate language or whatever. So and I'm not quite as ill as I used to be, so I can find my words more easily, which is always a higher risk, because a higher velocity, higher risk produces more chance of error. Anyway, sorry, I'm just making fun of myself. So you should watch yesterday's video. It's just one long freaking chain of explanations after another, and I especially when we got into occult versus supernatural.
That was good.
That was really good. There was a bunch of them in there like that were quite useful. So I recommend people see that. That said, the one we just covered, the spy thing, is pretty interesting too. And I guess all I'm trying to get across with these messages, which you and Martin disapprove of, I'm teasing you. You and Martin disapprove of, is that I'm just teasing. Is that I'm a little forgiving because I understand people just follow incentives, right? So what does that mean? We don't need that many skulls in the pyramid, but we need skulls in the pyramid, but the number isn't as large, right? I mean, people will look at the pyramid and say, "Oh, I see what we were doing. That didn't work out too well." So you don't. In other words, there's a certain equilibrium between the size of the pyramid and the number of skulls in it, and the influence that it exerts on the people who are previously involved in the thing.
Wait. The existence of a skull pyramid in and of itself, regardless of how high it is, indicates to everybody that you're serious.
Yes. It's funny. You think it's a joke, but I bring this up all the time. Is I don't know how if I said that on television today, I'd probably get in trouble in America. But in Ukraine, I kept saying, the problem with Maidan is we didn't kill enough of them. Right? I mean, that was the whole problem. If we just set up a hanging thing and just hung, which is what, I mean, they were going to go, they were on the way to kill the president when he left, right? So if they just hung them all, well, not all of them, but, a couple of hundred of them, that would have sent a fucking very clear message that this is the end result of democracy. You're gonna have a democratic solution to the problem.
Well, the way I see it is, the Romans did this with crucifixion.
Yes.
On the Via Appia, right? There you go.
That's the most, the crucifixion. Well, a cross is kind of expensive, and you got it. But then you got Vlad, and he just sticks a pole.
Oh my! He just made fields of them. Like,
right. Oh my God. And then you got the old-fashioned, the proper Anglo way, which is the hanging tree, right?
Oh my!
So I mean, it just depends. But the corrective value of that message is very high, right? I mean, it has a very.
It's difficult to mistake the significance of it.
So, I'm not all for our. I'm not in favor of too many better angels of our nature, so to speak. You need the guys that said no. There's this whole blame, prosecution blame. There's this whole restitution problem. There's this codification problem. There's this prevention problem, and then there's this let's make it rememberable for 1,000 years
yes
problem, right? You want to, because the degree of which it sticks in cultural memory is the degree to which it modifies behavior, right? And so the state, the people in the government, you need to really go through and makes the French, use the guillotine. The problem with the guillotine is it's really fast, effective. It's a public thing, but it kind of, and it's fast and clear. But it sort of it makes sort of industrializes a process. Crucifixion, you're up there.
Yeah, that's a handcrafted.
That's a really craftsmanly way of solving the problem.
Damn labor intensive, man. Then what? The Romans were hanging them. They would put one every mile on the road, and it's like, just to remind you, it's like that's a close shave. It's the Brill Cream ad, right?
Well, I mean, the whole spike up the backside thing, so you slowly bleed to get the death from the. I'm a little bit. That might be a bit much for some people. I mean,
yeah. That's rough.
but let's just go the big oak tree, the hanging tree, the twitch. Those things are
I was reading
those things are good.
report from the Reformation days, so 1450, is they put the body in a cage and hung it from the building and left it there, and the crows took it out. It's like, that's rough. That's just, that'll leave that body up there for a long
On the other hand, it's extraordinarily good advertising.
It just says what it is. It's like everybody knows what that is. It's like, good Lord.
If anybody if you haven't followed me long enough to get on my joy over Harpington's invention of the term genetic pacification, then please go do a search out for genetic pacification and read Harpington's pieces on it, which is basically the study of how many people we hung after 1200 in order to genetically pacify the population well enough to have the 1600s and on, right? So, and then it's pretty clear we were wrong by getting rid of lynching and all this other stuff. We had it right, it worked pretty well.
I have to object. It's necessary for me to object. Because damn, Curt.
The duel, we got rid of the duel. We got rid of
there's
lynching, the duel, and we can't even punch each other in the face now. And those things were necessary means of maintaining respect and responsibility for the private and common.
Right. So it's like, let's say it's a form of accountability that hasn't been quite balanced out by its loss.
Right.
Because it's like and I was thinking of this because the Brits were transporting people to Australia that they didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like that's not a bad solution.
No.
Just the mass incarceration is really a ridiculous overly expensive opportunity to
I mean, it's just hanging is just economically efficient and genetically rewarding. So I mean, I'm all in favor of hanging.
But I think the purpose of the mass incarceration is kind of like just to let them grow out of it. And
it does work, right? I mean, it's not like it doesn't work. The problem is the amount of time. They try to say, well, you got to do 2 years. It doesn't do you any good because until you're 40, it doesn't make any difference. Right? It's like, okay, well, you obviously are a problem, so we're going to stick you in there till you're 40. I mean, it's not a
right.
And anyway, I don't know. I'm just trying to be funny to entertain the audience, but there's a little bit of truth, and there's more than a little bit of truth.
Kind of a little bit is understatement, unfortunately.
A lot of the problem with our capital punishment gets it wrong is there's a difference between the preponderance of the evidence, right, and the unmistakable testimony. Right. Okay. I mean, right. We've got your DNA, your blood. You're holding on to the knife, right? I mean, so, and the other thing is like the 3 strikes thing is really quite effective, right? I mean, that's like 3 strikes and
right.
3 strikes and you're out. And the next time we hang you, I mean, that's. The thing is, it works.
You don't have to hang very many. I think that once the intended recipient of the message recognizes that you're serious and you're not playing, they will quit playing around too.
Well, they will change the nature of their criminality. The problem we're going to have, and this is a awful topic, is that people who have poor impulse control aren't dissuaded by future threats. In other words, it doesn't matter. And so we still have the problem of poor impulse control. That's only solved by hanging for generations until the poor impulse
That's
control.
just impulse control. That's genetic
That's
pacification.
genetic
That's history.
pacification. It's not solved by anything else. Now you could say the combination of Christian indoctrination, which does work, and military order discipline does work on young men. Because what's the purpose of both of those? Emotional and psychological and emotional self-regulation, right? That it's basically dog training for humans.
Right.
And it works absolutely fine. And so the problem is, of course, we've created you're a special flower that, if not subject to horrors, will bloom. No, you're a genetic machine. It's a random number that's deterministic. The 80% deterministic and 20% a random number generator. And the random number generator combined with determinism is usually a determinism that is not particularly helpful, is a really bad thing. And the only thing we can do there is remove you from the reproductive cycle. Now you might do that through sterilization, right? Sterilization is step one, and removal is step two, right? I mean, so there's correction, sterilization, and removal is deletion is a pretty good escalation path. And so, I mean, can we make that happen today? You can't with an empathic majority, right? You can't. So we have to restore systemic rule rather than empathic rule. In other words, you have to create an empirical government, not a romantic one.
I'm writing that in my book. All right.
Got to get a haircut, Dr. Brad.
I did.
I'm going to look like the guy under the bridge soon. From my beard.
Oh. Well, I don't know that you have so many up there because it gets kind of cold under the bridge in that part of the world.
Yeah, I keep, of course, in my mind, I still live. My visualization of the world is I still live in Seattle. And we had men under the bridge there.
Yep. Arizona's pretty big on that.
Yeah.
It's too mild of a climate, you know what I mean? It's like it's not Alaska, okay? Alaska doesn't have that problem.
No, you die.
It's just nobody tries it.
Alaska has the other problem, which is it's a migratory point for antisocials. So
yeah,
Alaska has a huge murder problem. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're inside in the dark, it means you're in close proximity. I mean, theoretically, that would produce domestication syndrome, which you would. It's counterintuitive. That doesn't mean people become domesticated. It means that people who are undomesticated already will be culled from the population by murder.
Yes, yes, that's how I was regarding it. It's like it sounds like a genetic pacification.
Yeah, it's
underway.
So it's like well, you keep sending them there. It's like you send crazy people to California and Florida. I mean, I don't, crazy magnets.
Oh my!
You send antisocials to Alaska, where they just kill each other in large numbers, because what's there to do in the winter, except which is basically always, is alcohol, drugs, or get pissed at each other and kill each other because you're frustrated. And you can't it's hard to get caught. Right. I mean, it's hard to get caught is the other thing, right? I mean, up there. So I don't know. I just find Alaska to be an interesting.
It is another world.
It's an interesting socioeconomic experiment to look at that little community, because it's essentially our system, right? But imposed in an environment that is extraordinarily hostile, right? And attracts not necessarily the best. Excuse me. No, that's not correct. It attracts is different from exists, right? So it's like that doesn't mean everybody in Alaska is crazy. It just means that there are more people going there that are antisocial, right?
Right. I'd say that yes, that the people will tend to flee away from civilized areas to there as a refuge, kind of.
Yes.
And because there's vast empty spaces to disappear into and be antisocial in.
Yes. And it's cheap, right? I mean,
I just go like this. I go, I don't know.
the government gives you oil money,
Hmm.
after a certain amount of time. So, anyway, it's just lots of interesting social experiments going on in the world, right?
Well, yeah, I just read the 250,000 undocumented so-called migrants found their way into my country this year in December.
Well, we act like we can't send them back.
I don't.
No, I mean, there's this assumption you can't make them go away. I mean, the only reason the African slaves weren't relocated to Africa was because nobody wanted to borrow the money to pay for it. Well, I mean, it's a purely financial. Well, look at the cumulative cost of not doing that was. Well, what's the cumulative cost of not sending third worlders away? I mean, I'm not going to mention any particular group I'm thinking of, but
I understand you. Just,
just I don't know.
I do.
I'm feeling like an Archie Bunker right now, and I'm trying to be humorous.
You wait, Archie was
getting
funny.
out of hand. Well,
Archie was funny, man. I was gonna make the remake of the All in the Family, set in modern times, right? So it still has Rob Reiner on it as the new curmudgeon, the liberal curmudgeon, and a young Archie kind of guy. Because Archie was right.
Of course he was right.
And Meathead was named that for a reason.
He shows up on social media, Reiner does, and he's exactly what your typical Jewish liberal with a feminine mind represents, and the shit he comes up with that's so insane, yet he has utter confidence in only a woman could think that, right? I mean, you can't
and believe it.
And believe it. You couldn't do it.
No.
Anyway, so now that we've dragged this fucking conversation in a rat hole,
well, anything that starts with genetic pacification's gotta end rough. Because it goes to the bottom of a bog.
Yeah, peat bogs worked, man.
I have to advertise that again because it's funny, man. It's like, look up peat bog preservation because it's funny, man. It's like they dig up the 1,000-year-old corpse out of the peat bog and then they call the police because it looks fresh.
Yes. Well, that stuff started to come out when I was in college. I think it came out when I started becoming aware of it when I was in college. And it's just they find more of them now. But the problem is once you use machines to get peat, instead of people, it's harder to find them.
Yeah.
But I mean, just so the audience, because there's this whole Christian thing, is we stopped human sacrifice. Okay, let me help you something. The Roman.
Wait a minute, I gotta get the humor. Okay, go.
What?
I have to laugh because it's just the introduction to that was silly. I liked it though. Go ahead.
Okay, so we Christians, we stopped human sacrifice. No. You brought in capital punishment, crucifixion. Okay, let me tell you how things work in the Germanic world, pre-Christian world. Everything's done by restitution. Right? And there's only two things you can be capital punishment for, is infidelity, right, and cowardice in battle, right? So otherwise, it's just restitution. So the people who are hung, the people who have their thrift throats, right? I mean, there's two reasons for it. Either they did that, or the way you get rid of somebody is you sacrifice them. Because now it's not judicial punishment, it's a gift to the gods. So, all right. Now, does this get taken out of context so that some psycho king sacrifices his own kid? Yeah, it does, right? Although that's probably genetic pacification right there. In any event, there was capital punishment wasn't a thing. The Christians brought capital punishment. All right. But sacrifice is, which is common in primitive societies, and the reason is that sacrifice absolves everybody from clan cycles.
No
retribution. And so the person who is sacrificed, despite being a slut or a whore or a scumbag or a psycho or whatever, they're sacrificed to the gods. But the real answer is that the people who are giving up this person for sacrifice, the member of the family, are now heroic instead of retaliatory. So
that's an interesting emotional analysis.
It's so obvious, though. I mean, because
it's not obvious enough.
Really?
No, I don't think it's obvious enough, because it's like the issue is the complainant about human sacrifice will make they will find it offensive or morally offensive just by virtue of what you call it, not by its functionality.
Maybe, but it sure is a pretty good way of not having passions of the moment dictate what's done to people. Right? It's quite effective, really.
Yes.
And you have to be careful of any story transmitted to us over ages through Christian eyes, because the Christians are to propaganda what the Russians are to propaganda. Right? I mean, and there's a reason why the Russians are good at it, because the Christians got it from the Jews and the Russians got it from the Jews, and that's what they do, right? This is where it comes from. So propaganda being what it is. So it's like you can tell the Aesop's fables that aren't written by Aesop because they have silly Christian concepts in them instead of observable concepts. They have Deus ex machina in them. And the same thing to do with, you can tell, you can still see the Christian influence in Beowulf, right? Even if you're trying to see beyond it. Right, you're trying to see beyond it. What's really interesting is the surviving Celtic myths, which are recorded because what's his name? Patrick is pretty late, right? I mean, he's pretty late in the Christianization of Ireland. So some of this stuff is written down, recorded, and passed on long enough that we could get access to the Irish myths the way we get access to the Icelandic versions of the Nordic myths. And so once you realize those myths and magics and whatever, I don't know what to call them, are in our world, in the European world, are closer to spells than to theology. Does that make sense? They're the natural European stuff is mechanical rather than super authoritarian. In other words, under your control. The spells are under your control.
Oh, so it's an invocation of for purposes.
Right, and there's this. It's because it grows out of metalsmithing. Right, so metalsmithing is like magic, right? And so you're doing all this stuff, and so a lot of this stuff grows out of being. That's why the blacksmith and the devil, or the demon, there's no devil in European civilization, but the blacksmith and the demon is one of our oldest. It's the oldest myth we know of, other than the Green Man.
Yep.
because, and so you have this very magical versus the versus thing, which is it's really pseudoscience, right?
Yeah.
And then you're trying to keep spirits alive, right? Spirits happy. I have one of my favorites that comes to mind, which is the spirits that live in the well, which is the portal to the underworld, right? You know, the spirits live in the well, and how women you would remember what you would do to be a good wife and mother by respecting the spirits, which is anthropomorphized or perfected, going against evil, which is anthropomorphism of good habits, right? It's by their negative expression rather than the anthropomorphic expression by imitation of good habits, which is what the Christians try to teach you. Training
So
humans.
it's a via positiva versus a via negativa.
Negativa. It's fascinating. So you try to appease the spirits, like what do you do with shoes? What do you do with wet clothes? What do you do with, what's the ritual you follow before the mother goes to bed at night, right? These are all things. And the thing is, I remember the women's because they were the most foreign to me, but the men's are the same, right? They're just more obvious. The women's were more interesting because they're less commonly understood. It's like most stuff in history. The male side comes down and you don't necessarily see the female side, whereas the female side is almost more psychologically interesting than the male because it's got more psychological depth to it, because it has to have more psychological depth to it.
Right? Layers of complexity.
Yeah. Anyway, so can you say something again? Say 1, 2, 3.
3.
Something's wrong with your microphone. Maybe it's partly unplugged.
Really?
You hit something there, hit a cable or something.
We go the spirits, the electronic spirits.
See, that's what we get for talking about spirits, talking about the old gods.
It appears to be plugged in, Curt. Nothing occurred. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. There's a lot of distortion in the sound.
Does it have to do with the fact that my microphone is this far away?
No, it's you moved forward and it turned on, so I'm just assuming you touched something or not, right?
Are you picking up a sound?
It's distortion. Your video's fine, so there's no, and video usually lags first before sound. What I think we'll have to do is we'll stop the recording and we'll reconnect, because now I'm losing your sound entirely. All right, so I'll stop the recording and we'll reconnect. Yeah, your sound is now, it's gone.
Now I've got it.
There you go. What happened?
I don't know. It was using a different mic. It was using the mic on the camera sitting on top of the thing, and instead of the Yeti mic that I have here.
There we go. Well, now we're good.
Whew, sorry, Curt.
See, well, don't blame the spirits. It was them.
Well, I don't know how it's switched.
We're talking about them without adequate reverence, right? And
I see. It was a digital manifestation.
No. Think about this, all right? Think about this is fascinating study of religion, all right? If it's spirits, what's your agency against the spirits right in front of you versus your agency over distant gods or a very abstract distant god, right? You can only beg, like whatever, but with spirits, you can actually do something about them.
They're right local.
They're right local. And that's why I say I think I prefer our ancient religion from this sense of it fosters the Indo-European sense of agency over the world.
Right, because you're responsible for appeasing the local spirit right now, because he's only bothering you a little bit.
Yes. And it's very interesting in that our spirits tend to be natural and familial and mischievous rather than evil. Whereas if you go back into ancient history, which you're a really good, you understand very clearly, about the sorcerers and whatever. If you go back, it was an industry,
Oh, yeah.
a vast industry to go to sorcerers, basically, or whatever you want to call these people, occultists who would do things for you and relieve you of this stuff. But you see how external that is? It's not you.
You have to hire the guy.
You have to hire the guy. And so it's this is why it really bothers me. I say the origin of scams is in religion, right? It's the origin of the huckster, of the scam, is in this Middle Eastern religion, because we don't see it everywhere, right? We don't see huckster religion everywhere. We see huckster religion come out of the Middle East. And I'm like, well, I mean, Gobekli Tepe's there, right? I mean,
right.
The first origin of hucksterism starting there, and it became a massive industry. Well, why? Because people were in fact out of control, because these authoritarian fuckers kept coming in all the time, changing up the government and punishing you, and you basically lacked agency. So what is your only safeguard? Is your family, right? And if you haven't got your family, what do you got? You need a psychological device, right? So that's what you got, and you're vastly ignorant, and these powers that are way above you, and and there's a heterogeneous world around you that's often in change, because you're at the intersection of 4 continents. So it's kind of, you can sort of see why this hucksterism turns into a means of social governance.
Yes. And I sent you a text about this yesterday.
You did? I didn't see it.
Oh, it's on the Signal, and it's like the issue is the Matrix is the name of it. It's a feminine collection of justifications that holds the society together, which makes everything okay for everybody that's participating in the Matrix.
Yes.
And it's like, so we call it, it's normative functional. So this is normal functioning. It's like, so it's like, look, we got a new alpha hetman just took over the Babylon.
That's right.
And so the sorcerers there's the sorcerers and the magi, but everything is just fine. They have to calm the population down. They're just going to collect taxes like the last one did, and nothing has changed. Everything is just fine, except now we named the god a new god so that everybody's happy.
Yeah, but it's just serfdom, right?
Yes,
Serfdom.
serfdom.
It's just serfdom. So the thing I like about the Germanic model is it's not serfdom. You're fucking responsible. You're responsible for keeping the spirits happy, right? And that's just an anthropomorphic job of saying right? A spirit is a present thing, but by doing these rituals, you're extending your time preference. So you're producing time preference. It's the same thing as life after death. You're trying to extend the person's time preference so that they make better intertemporal judgments, right? They're less impulsive. So all these things are just impulse control. And that's why military does impulse control for men better, because it's very physical. And superstition does impulse control for women. They think magically anyway. So why not, they predict emotions and anthropomorphism anyway. So mysticism tends to be it's why it's more religions spread through women, where they spread through women naturally, and they spread through men politically. Right? Because you're trying to get people to be serfs. I mean, it's interesting to me that Buddhism is such a pretty decent religion, yet they had they tried to impose it on the Japanese so many times before it actually stuck. And even though it stuck, it didn't really. They're still basically ancestor worshippers with some Buddhist mental discipline, if there's even any Buddhism there. Whereas you can understand Buddhism in the middle and upper classes in India, all right, because it's like I want some fucking peace of mind amid this insufferable chaos, right? And Buddhism is
barely sufferable. It's sufferable.
Right.
You can suffer it.
Yeah. Whereas in China, well, the other thing is that the thing about Buddhism is it makes you numb, and positive. And so you just treat things as actually socially constructive. I mean, it's reasonable. It's not action oriented, which is the problem, like Stoicism is. And then you have it's incompatible Confucianism. Matter of fact, it's like Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism is just a class structure, really.
That's it.
It's like we have theology, philosophy, and science. They have essentially, I don't know, science and law, and they have Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, and they argue with me like, well, this philosopher is more important than that one. I'm like, these are like, we in the West we say Aristotelian, we say theological, Platonistic, and Aristotelian, right? These are categorical expressions of slightly different modes of thinking. And if I can't bring up odd, unknown Chinese philosophers and have the same meaning get across. So I stick with it's, Sun Tzu, Confucius, Tao and Buddha, right? Taoism and Buddha. And I'm like, well, it's the same shit as we have here, right? I mean, it's just by slightly different means. That's so funny. You didn't like something I just said.
You're not cussing.
Oh, sorry.
So I regard it as a Hebrew expression. It just means discourse. Gesundheit.
Excuse me.
Fine work.
Something.
So it's operations for impulse control, where it functions at it's functional impulse control methods.
Yeah, but it's just, where is the responsibility sit? So that's always that question you got to ask. It's like, where does anthropomorphism sit in this? And where does responsibility sit in this? And so at the top, you're always going to have, I'm responsible, and there's no anthropomorphism. At the bottom, it's like, I can't be responsible, and it's anthropomorphism, right? And then there's this gradient of responsibility and anthropomorphism as we go through. And it's like, shit, it's so obvious, right? When you sort of understand that there's just so few motivating factors to man.
I know, but it's like, it's not how it's discussed and considered, which is an interesting function. So there's two supplies. There's a supply of anthropomorphism, and there's a supply of agency or responsibility.
Everything else is just acquisition, right? And the problem is acquisition is complicated across interests and class and abilities, right? So you end up with classes.
There you have it.
And so, and it's just
then this
you reduce it to three properties, right? You reduce it to those three properties, right?
Right.
Yeah. Anthropomorphism is really another way of saying systematizing versus empathizing, right? And
right.
Responsibility is another way of saying men seek responsibility, which we call dominance, and women seek evasion of responsibility for the purpose of consumption, right? So capitalization versus consumption. And then the rest is just we're acquiring, and then we have to acquire things within a class structure because our radius of value to one another is basically determined by our abilities, and our abilities is what separates us into classes. I mean, there's three variables. I mean, it's just humiliating.
The competency that is how you're. What's the third variable? It's just to
competency,
responsibility, and empathizing, which is
empathizing, sympathizing, right? I mean, that's like the neutral version of sex differences, right? I mean, it's like if you want to say the three primary causes are those, and then the sex differences manifest in those. Those differences.
Yeah, it's manifest in a bimodal relationship.
Yes. Yeah, it's just acquisition.
That was so dull. It's just now this is when it's time for the we have to dismiss, we have to quell the spirits a little bit by having a little missive about how sad it is that we're all bots.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you
just invent a little.
So let me ask you a question, because you used to say, I used to say it's humiliating, and you would say, well, it's only humbling. But I'm like, I'm not sure that I wasn't right, that it's humiliating.
I don't know that I can mount a good argument today.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. I might have been. I was on your side for a while there, but the more every time I encounter one of these things, I'm like, I just feel it's just humiliating, right? I mean, to look in the mirror and realize we're all morons, right? I mean, and all this shit we do is just an amazing accident of, despite the fact that we're morons, right? I mean, it's just because what we're doing is algorithmically or programmatically dumb. I mean, we acquire
So
shit.
simple.
It's simple. A dumb. I mean, it's not hard. Dumb. It doesn't require us. What we do doesn't require us to understand what we do.
No.
Right?
No, that's the beauty of it.
That's the beauty.
It's very expensive to compute that.
Yes.
Oh my. It is funny.
I think, does that get us to the tetrahedron you're always talking about? I mean, the diamond to tetrahedron question, because it's really, that might be the top, which is acquisition, those three, then the sexual manifestations underneath them as means of coercion. That might be the tetrahedron where we're trying to find some way of simplifying everything into a single image, right?
Right.
That
Yes.
might acquire,
Give another day.
defeat time, acquire. Right. We have these three axes: capability, responsibility, systematizing versus anthropomorphizing. And underneath that, you get the sex difference. Actually, all you do is rotate the triangle, and you get the sex differences as you get the three means of coercion, and you get the sex differences as the three means of coercion. That's all of existence right there. And then you have the problem of institutional order, which came first: religion, state, or law, right? Religion is the simple one. The female force is the less simple one, which is in other words, a more expensive one, because religion is cheap and force is expensive. And then you have the difficult one, which is law.
And it's just a funny thing because it's like, okay, so all the bad boys escaped the Caucasus and went into the plains, and I've seen maps that show that as Tartarus, which is the underworld according to the Greeks, right? And the Roman, isn't that the name for the underworld? And it's like they went to hell because it's like it's the same as so just hang with me here because it's funny. It's like it's the same as transporting all your criminals out. It's like the bad boys who can't make it in civilized society you exile them to the frozen tundra where the horses are, and they become the guys who can't get along with each other, who eventually they're like the slow kids. They figured out how to get along together because it's like, we're going to steal all their stuff. But we had to figure out all kinds of ways to organize to do that because it's just disagreeable men, right? All the agreeable men stayed and were serfs for the emperor down in the valley in the Tigris and Euphrates.
So we've reviewed all of human history, right? I mean, we've sort of done the whole thing, and so let's resolve this question: is it merely humbling, or is it humiliating?
I'm not humiliated yet.
You're not humiliated.
I'm certainly humbled by it, though. It is. It's like because it's an amazing amount of effort to understand it.
Yeah, but it's fascinating that we can do it without understanding it. It's just fascinating that it's just, and the reason we do it because it's just physics, right? We don't have a choice.
We
right?
have to do it that way because it's too expensive to do it any other way.
And cooperation is too valuable. So you really have to do it. I can't any longer. I have no capacity to throw my mind back in time and look at what we do objectively. So I can't imagine what it would be what another person would experience as learning this. I mean, because we learned the sciences. I mean, it was a big deal to learn electromagnetism and basic physics, optics, electromagnetism,
Right.
mathematics, through subatomic physics, right? To the chemistry, and the chemistry is a little easier to understand. Biology and genetics, biology. It's just like, but so you feel so empowered by those things because they let you stay the same while having dominion over this shit. But all of a sudden, that clarity
right.
in a mirror.
Yeah. Now what you're talking about is what the psychologists call the double hermeneutic, which is the double hermeneutic is the name for the fact that social sciences causes change in the way we are and the way we behave. And it's like, yeah, now it's self-reflection is necessary and now inevitable and unavoidable because we have figured it out.
I just don't know what this work ends up doing over 100 or 200. It's probably it's crazy because all of a sudden we're really simple because we have a variation we know what the optimum is. It's just variation from that. And so now you can't claim relativism.
Well, we have to, it becomes the inevitability that we must change the law.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. And it's like exactly what that translates into. Is dependent on the political will of the populace.
What do we do about what those who are empathizing, which we now know is basically magical thinking?
What do we do about them?
I want to. I know what you're going to say. I'm just trying to create enough of a picture for the audience so that when you hit them with the baseball bat, they'll be adequately awestruck. So if you look at these people, and what we're doing is we're showing that the feminine empathic mind is either genetically untrained or unfit for political discourse, political decisions, and there's not an opinion anymore. And so what do we do now? I'm asking you the question.
All right.
I mean,
we make it illegal. We make it illegal to lie to them. The issue is this. It's not the issue is.
Oh, I see.
The issue is not that it's the sorcerers that are the problem.
Yeah.
The previous attempt in the 1500s was to kill the witches. And it's like, no, the witches aren't the problem. It's the sorcerers that are misleading the witches and abusing their influence in the polity that is the problem.
Yep.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity, sir.
Just trying to serve it up for you, boss.
That's so we make it illegal to lie to the witches, so the witches aren't a problem. And we limit their misbehavior like that.
Because the witches can only do what the social construction they conform to permits them. So the problem then is limiting the social construction to that which is non-false. Right? In other words, they're affected by the water. The fish are they're fish. They're affected by the water. The social
right.
water, just like we're affected by
That's right.
By reality. All right.
That was easy. That was a good one though. That's what we have to do. So it's just we correct the laws, and it's a self-correcting situation.
Then you've got to go back to we spend this money in education, but it's not succeeding, and we have to go back to physical fitness, emotional fitness, right? And
that's right.
Cognitive fitness, and then skills. We have to go through the three fitnesses before we can it's okay if people fail. And unlike the concept of everybody gets a prize, knowing you fail to step up a level doesn't mean you can't know what's successful at your level. Right. And so as long as you do your duty, that's fine. So the question is,
That's right.
what's your duty in this rank? No, we don't have to have it. It's not a fixed thing, right? I mean, I matured socially slowly, right? And intellectually very quickly. Well, I mean, some people do the opposite. They mature socially quickly and
Right.
intellectually slowly, and some people don't mature at all. So, I mean, there has to be some, it has to be one of those things where you can choose to demonstrate competency, and I mean performatively in life. Like once you've shown I've attained this position in the workplace, and I've got a family, and I've built a house, and I'm not dependent upon others. I mean, I was like, I don't care if you got a 75 IQ. I met one.
That's right.
I met one the other day in the bank, which was fascinating. um, uh, uh, 70 IQ, if you could do all that stuff, then conscientiousness achieved for you what IQ didn't, right? I mean, that's dope, right? So, but a 75, I think he's probably 75, he's certainly under 80 IQ the other day in the bank. And it was so hard for him to just think of the words. Like he couldn't remember what to call the sleeve you put the card in. He couldn't remember. He didn't know. He knew he needed a plastic card, right? He knew he needed that. He's definitely not. In other words, you can tell when people are broken, right? It's usually their bodily movements are out of whack, because so it's a systemic malfunction. There's nothing wrong with this guy physically. It's just there, right? So he's trying to talk, and he's like a middle-aged black guy, right? I mean, late 30s, early 40s. And they're being really helpful to him, and they just explain things to him, and he's fine, right? And it takes like 3 people though to serve him, because he knows what he wants, and he's not even non-compliant.
He's trying.
He's actually trying, right? He's not feeling bad about himself. He's just saying, this is, he's not overly apologetic. He's just not rude. He's just like, I need a couple of those sleeves. I didn't say a couple. I need 3 of those sleeves, I think is what he said, or 4 or something like that. And he didn't say sleeves though. He said some word that made no fucking sense. But when you thought about it, it was like, oh, I see. That's the best word you can come up with, right? Right. And he says, he turns around to the bank manager who's trying to make sure that he's taken care of. And he says, how much money do I have? It's like, she knows, right? I mean, it's like, and you realize that there's people like that in the world, but there's people like that in the world who are not rude themselves, and we are not rude to.
No,
we can facilitate the world. That's right.
We go a little bit extra to take care of them a little bit better, because that's what's necessary to keep the wheels turning.
Right. And it's actually kind of nice, right? Because we all have periods where we're wrong. And I want the same treatment if in my IQ range is I want him to get in his IQ range, which is help me figure out what I'm not getting right here, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. So that kindness, that Christian love is a beautiful thing, right? The problem is when people get angry.
Yes.
And when they feel that they're being mistreated or whatever. I'm having a dizzy spell right now, so I apologize if I say or do something funny. So if you get this guy, we treat each other. We just need to be able to put the institutions in place by not telling people they're special flowers that can make it on their own and be thrown into a market economy, which is basically a adversarial meat grinder for those unfit for it. Right? I mean, I don't remember I heard what occupation he had, right? When it was there, and it was It wasn't even, it was something to do with like construction, like picking up stuff, right? But that's what a 70 IQ looks like, right? And they're not, that's the difference between, it's the same problem. How do I say this not? White person with a 60 or 70 IQ is something's wrong with them. A black person with a 70 IQ, there's nothing wrong with them because that's their normal distribution. In other words, there's a variation from the group mean that has that accounts for genetic load.
Yes.
But their distribution is around the 70s, right? So it's like I had a nanny for a while who was from Africa, right? And she couldn't have had a IQ over 75, but taking care of my kids, she was fantastic, right? She could, right? She could drive. She couldn't do math, and she'd just say, I can read, but I can't do math. It's just totally not broken. Just the learning curve is high. And that's what I saw in this guy. He's not broken. His learning curve is just too high to climb. Right. I happen to know somebody who's got like a 65 IQ, right? Birth defect, right? And he's broken. I mean, it's not, he's a white guy, it's broken, right? It's just things don't work right. It's not just the learning curve. It manifests in physical action, interpretation of events, like his social interaction is wrong, whereas this guy's social interaction wasn't wrong. He was fine. So we just need to take care of each other, but you need to be able to tell people need to feel they're okay being what they are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. And we need to give people the success criteria for what they are. I feel the Germans do that best. Right. But they're also working with Germans, so in German culture. So
At least they were formerly. We're not so sure right now. The Germans have got to get revived, I think.
it's not good things going on there right now. The nanny state was really bad bait for the German people. It just turned out to be really bad. Anyway, so an hour and 15 minutes in, my nose is kind of stuffy. I just had a dizzy spell.
Right. You want to take a break?
Let's you want to end this one and start a new one or no?
I think that will be okay. We can do a working session.
Okay, so we'll end this little chat and go to a working session. All right.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up.
Like, subscribe, do your thing.
Do it. Like, subscribe, and notifications, and leave us messages. And don't forget to check the website at the institution and consider being a generous donor.
All right. See you in a bit.